Don't touch him. The scream tore through the ballroom like a crack of thunder. Crystal glasses trembled. Conversations died mid-sentence. A violin quartet near the stage missed a note. For one suspended heartbeat, every face in the room turned toward the same impossible sight. A young black waitress had just grabbed Billionaire CEO Ethan Sterling by the wrist. Gasps rippled across the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Crown Hall in downtown Chicago. Beneath chandeliers the size of small cars and beneath ceilings painted with gold leaf patterns that reflected the warm glow of 100 lights, power had gathered for one purpose. A $2.8 billion merger. Governors, venture capitalists, media executives, and tech giants filled the room in custom-tailored suits and designer gowns. Every seat carried influence. Every handshake carried money. Every smile hid an agenda. And now all of it had stopped because of a waitress. Ethan Sterling slowly turned his head toward the woman holding his arm. At 42 years old, he had built Sterling Dynamics into one of the largest artificial intelligence companies in America. Forbes called him ruthless. Investors called him brilliant. Employees called him demanding. His sharp blue eyes had ended negotiations worth hundreds of millions with a single look. Yet in that moment, there was something else in his expression. Confusion, shock, and perhaps the slightest trace of anger. The young woman's hand remained locked around his wrist. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to interrupt. She certainly wasn't supposed to touch him. Security guards immediately stepped forward from opposite corners of the room. Several guests rose from their chairs. Camera phones appeared almost instantly. In a room full of people trained to recognize opportunity, everyone sensed the same thing. Something unusual was happening. The waitress looked no older than 25. Her dark uniform was simple and spotless. Her name tag read Maya Brooks. A few strands of hair had escaped her neat bun during the rush of the evening. Her breathing was fast but controlled. Her eyes never left Ethan Sterling's face. "Sir," she said, her voice barely. Above a whisper, "Please don't move." The words made no sense. Security closed in. The nearest guard reached toward her shoulder. Around the room, whispers exploded. Some guests assumed she wanted attention. Others thought she was protesting something. One investor laughed nervously and muttered that this would be all over social media by morning. But Maya wasn't looking at the crowd. She wasn't looking at the cameras. She wasn't even looking at the security team surrounding her. She was staring at something else entirely. Something behind Ethan Sterling. Something no one else seemed to notice. The ballroom lights shimmered against polished marble floors. Waiters carrying silver trays froze in place. The scent of expensive wine mixed with fresh roses imported from California. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's skyline sparkled against the night sky. It should have been a perfect evening. Yet suddenly the air felt different. Heavy, tense, almost electric. Ethan slowly pulled against Maya's grip. "Excuse me," he said. The room became so quiet that even the soft hum of the air conditioning sounded loud. Maya swallowed. Every instinct told her to let go. Every rule of her job demanded it. She knew what people saw when they looked at her. Just another waitress. Just another employee moving silently through a room of powerful people. Invisible until something went wrong. Yet her hand tightened instead of releasing. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. "Please," she repeated. "Just stay where you are." The security guards exchanged uncertain glances. Ethan's jaw tightened. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a champagne flute slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the floor. The sharp sound echoed across the room. Then came another noise. A sound few people noticed at first. A metallic click. Small, quick, almost hidden beneath the tension. Maya heard it immediately. Her eyes widened. And in that instant, every color seemed to drain from her face. Because the thing she feared most had just happened. The metallic click lasted less than a second. Yet Maya felt it land inside her chest like an alarm bell. Most people in the ballroom never heard it. They were too busy staring at her, too busy wondering why a waitress had disrupted the most important business dinner of the year. But Maya had heard that sound before. Not here. Not in a luxury hotel. Years ago, during a hospital training rotation she never got to finish, she had learned that danger rarely announced itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived disguised as something ordinary. A misplaced object, a nervous glance, a sound that did not belong. Her eyes locked on the far side of the room. Near a decorative column wrapped in white orchids stood a man she did not recognize. He was dressed like every other guest. Dark suit, expensive watch, polished shoes. Yet something felt wrong. He was not watching the commotion around Ethan Sterling. He was watching the exits. Calmly, deliberately, as if he already knew what would happen next. Maya felt a chill crawl up her spine. Security finally reached her. One guard stepped between her and Ethan. Another moved toward the crowd. The room buzzed with nervous whispers. Investors exchanged uneasy looks. Several guests quietly gathered their belongings. The confidence that had filled the ballroom only minutes earlier was beginning to crack. Ethan Sterling glanced from Maya to the guards. His irritation had not disappeared, but uncertainty had begun to replace it. He was a man trained to read people, to detect hesitation, to identify hidden motives. Yet when he looked into Maya's eyes, he saw something he could not easily dismiss. Fear. Not fear for herself. Fear for someone else. "What did you hear?" he asked. Maya opened her mouth, then stopped. The answer sounded ridiculous even to her. She did not have proof. Only instinct. Only fragments. A stranger who did not belong. A metallic click. A feeling that something was unfolding beneath the polished surface of the evening. Around them, the orchestra had stopped playing. The silence felt enormous. Across the ballroom, servers stood frozen beside silver carts filled with untouched desserts. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the air. Beyond the giant windows, traffic lights blinked against the Chicago skyline. The city continued moving. Inside Crown Hall, time seemed trapped. Maya noticed movement near the column again. The unfamiliar man adjusted his jacket and turned away. For the first time, urgency overtook hesitation. "Do not let him leave," she said. Several heads turned toward the direction she indicated. The man immediately disappeared behind a cluster of guests. One security guard moved after him. Another spoke rapidly into a radio. Confusion spread through the room. Ethan followed Maya's gaze. "Who is he?" Maya shook her head. "I do not know. I just know he should not be here." The answer sounded weak. She knew it. Everyone else knew it too. Yet something unexpected happened. Ethan did not laugh. He did not dismiss her. Instead, he studied her expression carefully. The room had spent years teaching people like Maya to remain invisible, to lower their eyes, to stay quiet. Yet she was doing neither. Whatever she believed it completely. Suddenly another voice interrupted the silence. "Sir." A hotel manager hurried toward Ethan, his face pale. "There is a problem with the guest registry." The manager stopped to catch his breath. "We found a badge assigned to someone who never checked in." The words seemed to drain the remaining color from the room. Several executives exchanged worried glances. Maya felt her pulse quicken. The man by the column. The missing identity. The metallic click. Separate pieces were beginning to connect. Somewhere deep inside Crown Hall, a service door opened. A loud alarm instantly echoed through the building. And in that moment, every person in the ballroom realized the evening was no longer about a business deal. The alarm cut through Crown Hall with mechanical precision. Not loud enough to create panic, but sharp enough to erase any illusion that the evening was still under control. Red indicator lights began flashing above several service entrances. Guests who had spent their lives commanding boardrooms suddenly looked uncertain. Wealth could buy influence. It could buy security. It could buy entire companies. But it could not buy certainty when something unexpected entered the room. Ethan Sterling remained standing near the center of the ballroom, his attention fixed on Maya Brooks. Minutes earlier, she had been invisible. Another member of the hotel staff, moving quietly between tables. Now she had somehow become the person everyone was watching. The irony was impossible to miss. Maya felt dozens of eyes pressing against her from every direction. Investors, politicians, journalists, security personnel, all waiting for her to explain something she could barely explain herself. Her instincts had brought her this far. Instincts and observations nobody else had noticed. Across the ballroom, security teams moved quickly but calmly. The unidentified guest Maya had pointed out was nowhere to be seen. It was as though he had vanished into the crowd. A radio crackled near one of the guards. The officer listened carefully before his expression tightened. "Sir," he said to Ethan, "we cannot locate the individual." The words landed heavily. Ethan folded his arms. His sharp gaze swept across the ballroom. He had spent 20 years building an empire by spotting weaknesses others overlooked. Yet tonight, someone else had seen danger first. That realization bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Nearby, the hotel manager nervously adjusted his tie. Sweat glistened along his forehead despite the cool temperature inside the room. "We are reviewing every guest credential," he said. "There appears to have been an unauthorized registration." Murmurs spread immediately. Unauthorized. The word traveled through the ballroom like a ripple across water. Maya noticed something then. Not a person, not a sound, an object. Near one of the decorative columns stood a black leather briefcase. Elegant, expensive, unremarkable, yet somehow it felt wrong. Earlier that evening, she had crossed that exact area while serving drinks. She was certain the briefcase had not been there. Her pulse quickened. She glanced toward the column, then back toward Ethan, then back again. The briefcase sat completely alone. No owner nearby, no guest claiming it. Just a silent object occupying the wrong place at the wrong time. Maya swallowed hard. "That case," she said quietly. One of the security officers turned. "What about it?" Maya hesitated. The room seemed to narrow around her. "I do not remember seeing it before." Several people exchanged skeptical looks. To many of them, it sounded insignificant. A forgotten bag at a crowded event. Nothing more. But Ethan noticed the change in her expression. She had the same look she wore when she heard the metallic click. The same certainty beneath the fear. He followed her gaze toward the briefcase. Silence settled over the ballroom once more. Outside the towering windows, distant headlights flowed through Chicago traffic like rivers of light. Inside Crown Hall, nobody moved. One security supervisor approached the area carefully. Another requested additional support through his radio. Guests instinctively stepped farther away. Not because anyone knew something was wrong. Because uncertainty itself had become contagious. Maya felt her heartbeat echo in her ears. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. Long hospital corridors. Emergency simulations. Instructors teaching students to trust observation before assumptions. Most people waited for proof. Sometimes proof arrived too late. The supervisor stopped several feet from the briefcase. He crouched slightly, studying it. The ballroom held its collective breath. Then his radio suddenly erupted with a new message. His eyes widened. He stood immediately and turned toward Ethan Sterling. "Sir," he said, "we just received confirmation. The name attached to the missing credential belongs to someone who passed away 3 years ago." The room froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. And for the first time that night, Maya realized this situation might be far larger than anyone had imagined. The revelation settled over Crown Hall like a winter storm rolling across a frozen lake. A credential assigned to a man who had died 3 years earlier. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered. The confidence that usually surrounded powerful people had vanished, replaced by something far less comfortable. Doubt. Ethan Sterling stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the security supervisor. "Repeat that," he said quietly. The supervisor glanced at the tablet in his hands. The identification was verified through multiple records. The registered guest should not be alive. The words sounded impossible, yet nobody challenged them. Across the ballroom, guests slowly stepped farther from the unattended briefcase. Crystal chandeliers continued to glow overhead, casting warm light across marble floors and expensive suites. But the atmosphere had changed completely. What had begun as a celebration now felt like a puzzle nobody understood. Maya Brooks felt her stomach tighten. She wished she could explain why every instinct inside her remained on edge. The briefcase worried her. The missing guest worried her. But more than anything, she could not stop thinking about the stranger who had disappeared. Something about him felt unfinished, as though he had left part of the story behind. Security officers established a wider perimeter around the column. Hotel staff quietly guided guests away from that section of the ballroom. The movement was controlled and professional, but tension lingered in every face. Nearby, one journalist lowered her phone and whispered to another reporter. Whatever happened next would become tomorrow's headline. Ethan noticed Maya watching everything. Unlike many others in the room, she was not focused on rumors or speculation. She was studying details, patterns, possibilities, the same way she had since the night began. "Tell me exactly what you saw," Ethan said. Several executives looked surprised. Hours ago, Ethan would never have sought advice from a waitress. Yet now he was asking her directly. Maya hesitated. She had spent most of her life being ignored. Speaking in front of billionaires felt unnatural. Still, she forced herself to answer. The man near the column kept checking the exits, she said. Everyone else was watching the stage or talking business. He was watching people leave. Ethan nodded slowly. Anything else? Maya looked toward the abandoned briefcase. He never looked nervous. That was what felt strange. Everyone at an event like this wants something. A deal. A conversation. An opportunity. He looked like he was waiting. The room fell silent again. Waiting. The words seemed to hang in the air. Then a new voice interrupted. Sir. Another. Security officer hurried across the ballroom, carrying a tablet. His breathing was slightly elevated. We found footage from a hallway camera. Every eye turned toward him. The officer displayed the screen. Grainy surveillance footage appeared. The image showed the unidentified man entering a restricted service corridor nearly 20 minutes earlier. Then something even stranger happened. The man stopped beside a maintenance door and appeared to hand an envelope to another individual. The second person's face was hidden beneath a baseball cap. Can you identify him? Ethan asked. Not yet, the officer replied. But there is something else. He enlarged a single frame from the video. The envelope carried a symbol printed in dark blue ink. A simple geometric design. Small. Easy to miss. Yet the moment Maya saw it, her eyes widened. The symbol looked familiar. She had seen it earlier that evening. Not in the hallway. Not near the column. Somewhere much closer. Somewhere inside the ballroom itself. Maya's heart began racing again. Slowly, she turned her head toward the stage where the merger documents were waiting to be signed. And suddenly she realized where she had seen the symbol before. The realization struck Maya so suddenly that she forgot about the crowd, the cameras, and the executives surrounding her. The symbol on the envelope was identical to one she had seen less than an hour earlier. Not on a person, not on a credential, on a leather folder resting beside the merger documents on the stage. Her eyes locked onto the signing table. Under the warm glow of the chandeliers, the folder appeared perfectly ordinary. Dark blue leather, silver trim, corporate branding, nothing that would attract attention. Yet now she could not unsee it. The same geometric mark sat embossed in the lower corner. Small enough to escape notice. Large enough to matter. The stage, Maya said. Several heads turned immediately. Ethan followed her gaze. What about it? Maya stepped forward, her voice steadier than she felt. The symbol is on one of the document folders. The room stirred again. Security personnel exchanged looks before moving toward the stage. What had begun as an uncomfortable interruption was becoming something much larger. The officer holding the tablet enlarged the image again. There was no mistake. The symbols matched. Guests watched in silence as two security supervisors approached the signing area. The massive digital screens behind the stage still displayed the logo of the merger event. Billion-dollar projections glowed across the monitors. Smiling promotional images remained frozen on the screens. Everything looked polished. Perfect. Yet beneath that polished surface, uncertainty continued spreading. One supervisor carefully examined the folders. Another reviewed the contents of the signing table. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Ethan Sterling remained near Maya. He noticed how tense she had become. How did you even see that symbol? He asked quietly. Maya hesitated. The truth sounded embarrassingly simple. I noticed details, she replied. When people spend their lives overlooking you, you learn to pay attention to everything. Ethan did not answer immediately. The words lingered between them. Around the room, many people knew exactly what she meant. Others pretended not to. A few moments later, one of the supervisors lifted a folder from the table. Sir, he called. You need to see this. Ethan walked toward the stage. Maya followed several steps behind. The crowd parted as they approached. Inside the folder was a stack of standard merger documents. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. Then the supervisor carefully turned over the final page. A second document had been inserted beneath it. It carried no company logo, no legal letterhead, no official identification, just a list of names. 23 names. Every person scheduled to attend the private signing ceremony after the dinner. Ethan studied the page. His expression hardened. Where did this come from? No one had an answer. The supervisor shook his head. This was not part of the official package. The room grew colder. Not physically, emotionally. The list felt deliberate, purposeful, like a message hidden inside plain sight. Maya stared at the names. Some belonged to investors. Others belonged to board members. Several belonged to political figures attending the event. There was no obvious pattern, at least not yet. Then another discovery emerged. A security analyst reviewing digital records suddenly looked up from his laptop. "Sir," he said, "the missing credential accessed the event network 3 times tonight." Ethan turned sharply. "For what purpose?" The analyst swallowed. "We are still investigating. But whoever used it attempted to reach the scheduling system." A murmur spread across the ballroom. Scheduling system. The words sounded harmless until people understood what they meant. Access to guest movements. Access to room assignments. Access to private meetings. Information. Valuable information. Maya felt a chill travel through her arms. The stranger had not seemed interested in money. He had not seemed interested in attention. He had seemed interested in timing. Waiting. Watching. Tracking movement. Suddenly another detail resurfaced in her memory. Earlier that evening, while serving drinks near the private elevators, she had overheard 2 men discussing a last-minute location change. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Now it felt important. Very important. Maya slowly looked toward Ethan. Before she could speak, the lights throughout the ballroom flickered once, then twice, and every conversation in the room stopped. The second flicker lasted less than a heartbeat, yet it transformed the atmosphere inside Crown Hall. Conversations vanished instantly. The giant screens behind the stage blinked once before stabilizing. Several guests instinctively reached for their phones. Others looked toward the exits. The uncertainty that had been growing all evening suddenly felt real. Ethan Sterling looked up at the chandeliers overhead. "Tell me we are not losing power," he said. A hotel technician standing near the control station quickly shook his head. "The building systems are stable, sir." His answer should have reassured everyone. Instead, it raised a new question. If the building was stable, why had the lights flickered at all? Maya felt another wave of unease. Earlier, she had trusted a feeling when nobody else did. Now that same feeling was returning. Stronger. More urgent. Her eyes moved. Across the ballroom. The abandoned briefcase. The signing table. The private elevators. The guests. The security teams. Something still did not fit. Then she remembered the conversation she had overheard near the elevators. 2 men speaking quietly while she refilled water glasses. At the time, she had barely paid attention. One sentence now echoed in her memory with startling clarity. "The schedule change gives us exactly 7 minutes." 7 minutes. Maya's heart skipped. She immediately turned toward Ethan. "The private signing ceremony," she said. Ethan frowned. "What about it? Was the location changed tonight?" For a moment, he looked surprised. Then one of his assistants stepped forward. "Yes," she answered. "The original signing room was moved this afternoon because of a maintenance issue." Maya's stomach tightened. "Who approved the change?" The assistant hesitated. "It came through the event coordination system." Every security officer in earshot suddenly went still. The same system that someone had attempted to access using a credential belonging to a dead man. The connection hit everyone at once. Ethan's expression hardened. "Find out who authorized that request." The command sent multiple staff members moving immediately. Nearby, the analyst working on the network records typed rapidly. His screen filled with logs and timestamps. The ballroom remained trapped between confusion and anticipation. Nobody wanted to leave. Nobody wanted to stay. They were witnessing something far stranger than a corporate event. Maya glanced toward the stage again. The merger documents no longer seemed important. Billions of dollars suddenly felt secondary to the mystery unfolding around them. Then the analyst abruptly stood up. "Sir." Every head turned. "I found the authorization trail." Ethan stepped closer, and the analyst swallowed. The request originated from inside the hotel. Silence. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Inside the hotel?" "Yes, sir." The analyst pointed at the screen. "Not from an outside source. Someone physically present at the event used an internal access point." A murmur spread through the crowd. The threat was not somewhere else. It was here, among them. Maya looked around the ballroom. Hundreds of faces. Wealthy investors. Government officials. Hotel employees. Media representatives. Somewhere in that sea of people was someone who knew exactly what was happening. Suddenly, a security officer's radio crackled loudly. The message that followed caused his face to drain of color. "We found the missing individual on another camera," the voice reported. "He entered the executive conference level 23 minutes ago." Ethan immediately asked the question everyone was thinking. Did he leave? The radio remained silent for a moment. Then came the answer. Negative. We have no footage of him exiting. The room froze. The man had not left the building. He was still somewhere inside. Maya slowly looked toward the private elevators at the far end of Crown Hall. Their polished steel doors reflected the ballroom lights, like mirrors. A small indicator above them suddenly illuminated. One of the elevators was moving, and it was heading directly toward their floor. The illuminated number above the elevator climbed steadily higher. 22, 23, 24. Each change felt louder than the last. No music played now. No conversations filled the room. The only sounds were the soft hum of the hotel ventilation system and the occasional crackle from security radios. Hundreds of eyes remained fixed on the elevator doors at the far end of Crown Hall. Maya Brooks felt her pulse racing. Something was about to happen. She could feel it. Around her, security personnel quietly adjusted their positions. Several officers moved closer to Ethan Sterling while others established a perimeter around the elevator bank. The ballroom's polished marble floors reflected the flashing indicator light overhead. 25. 26. The elevator was still coming. Ethan stared toward the doors. Earlier that evening, he had been focused on billion-dollar contracts and strategic partnerships. Now he found himself waiting beside a waitress whose instincts had uncovered more in 1 hour than an entire security operation had discovered all night. "You really believe this is connected?" he asked quietly. Maya never took her eyes off the elevator. "I do." Ethan studied her for a moment. "Even without proof?" Maya nodded slowly. "Sometimes proof arrives after the truth." The answer surprised him. Before he could respond, one of the security analysts rushed forward carrying a tablet. "Sir," he said, "we found another piece of the network activity." Ethan turned. "What is it?" The analyst looked unsettled. The unauthorized user did not only access scheduling information. A ripple of tension moved through the room. "What else?" Ethan asked. "They accessed guest biographies." Several executives exchanged confused looks. Guest biographies seemed harmless. The analyst continued. "Names, positions, professional histories, personal interests, family details, everything available through the event database." Maya immediately understood what that meant. Whoever had entered the system was not searching for a location. They were studying people, learning about them, preparing. The realization sent a chill through the ballroom. Suddenly, the gathering felt less like a corporate dinner and more like a carefully observed stage. The elevator indicator reached 28, then 29. The top executive floor. It stopped. Silence followed. A long silence. Security officers exchanged looks. Nothing happened. The doors remained closed. Several guests released nervous breaths. Perhaps the elevator had simply been called by someone else. Perhaps this entire situation was a misunderstanding growing larger through fear and speculation. Then the elevator began moving again, this time downward, directly toward Crown Hall. The atmosphere tightened instantly. Maya noticed something strange. Not everyone looked afraid. Near the back of the ballroom, one man appeared unusually calm. He stood beside a decorative arrangement of white orchids, holding a glass of sparkling water. Unlike everyone else, he was not watching the elevator. He was watching Ethan. Maya narrowed her eyes. The face looked familiar, not because she had spoken to him, because she had served his table earlier. He had spent most of the evening alone, quiet, unremarkable, invisible, the kind of guest nobody remembered. Yet now she recognized something else. The silver cufflink on his left sleeve carried the same geometric symbol they had found on the envelope and the document folder. Maya's breath caught. For a moment she wondered if she was mistaken. Then the man slowly adjusted his sleeve. The symbol caught the chandelier light and flashed unmistakably. Her heart pounded. "Ethan," she whispered. The billionaire followed her gaze. The man near the orchids smiled politely at someone passing by. Calm, controlled, completely ordinary. Yet the moment Ethan saw the cufflink, his expression changed. Because for the first time all night, the mystery was no longer hiding in shadows. It was standing openly inside the ballroom. For several seconds nobody moved. The discovery hung in the air like a lightning strike frozen in place. The man near the orchids remained perfectly composed, his expression calm, almost friendly. He did not run. He did not appear nervous. If anything, he looked relieved, as though a game that had lasted all evening was finally reaching its final move. Ethan Sterling slowly shifted his attention from the cufflink to the man's face. Security officers noticed the change immediately. Their posture tightened. Hands moved toward communication devices. Guests sensed it too. Conversations faded once again as dozens of eyes turned toward the quiet stranger. Maya Brooks felt her pulse pounding in her ears. Earlier that night, she had only sensed that something was wrong. Now the pieces were beginning to fit together. The credential connected to a deceased individual. The altered schedule. The hidden document. The network access. The mysterious symbol. None of it felt random anymore. The man raised his glass slightly, almost like a polite greeting. Then he set it down on a nearby table. "Interesting evening," he said calmly. His voice carried farther than expected. Several guests looked stunned. Security officers immediately began moving toward him. Yet before they could reach him, he slowly lifted both hands. "I would advise everyone to relax," he said. "I am not here to hurt anyone." The statement should have eased tension. Instead, it deepened it. Because nobody had mentioned harm. Nobody had accused him of anything specific. Yet somehow he seemed to know exactly what everyone feared. Ethan stepped forward. "Who are you?" The stranger smiled faintly. "That is a complicated question. Try a simple answer," Ethan replied. The room remained silent. Cameras were recording now. Journalists stood frozen, barely believing what they were witnessing. The stranger glanced around the ballroom. His eyes passed over politicians, investors, executives, and finally landed on Maya. For the first time all evening, uncertainty crossed his face. "You were not supposed to notice," he said quietly. Maya felt the weight of every eye in the room shift toward her. She said nothing. The stranger shook his head in disbelief. Hundreds of people in this room. Billionaires. Analysts. Security experts. Yet the only person paying attention was the waitress. The words landed harder than anyone expected. Because everyone knew he was right. Ethan's expression darkened. "Answer the question." The stranger nodded. "Very well." He reached into his jacket slowly and removed a folded document. Security officers tensed immediately, but he simply held up a sheet of paper. "I work for an independent risk assessment organization." Confused murmurs spread across the ballroom. The explanation sounded absurd. "Eh, what?" Ethan asked. "An organization hired to identify vulnerabilities before they become disasters." The stranger's voice remained calm. "Your merger attracted enormous attention. Financial, political, technological. Multiple clients requested an evaluation of the event's security integrity." Ethan stared at him. "You created all this chaos for an evaluation?" "No," the stranger replied. "The chaos already existed. I simply revealed it." Silence followed. Then he began listing facts. Unauthorized credentials entered the system undetected. Schedule modifications were approved without verification. Sensitive guest information was accessible through weak security layers. Unidentified items remained unnoticed in public areas. Internal communications failed to connect critical details. With each observation, faces around the room grew more uncomfortable. Because every point was true, Maya suddenly understood something. The briefcase, the symbol, the list of names. None of it had been designed to cause harm. It had been designed to expose weaknesses. The stranger looked toward Ethan one final time. "The most alarming discovery was not your technology failure," he said. Then his eyes shifted toward Maya. "It was your human failure." The room fell completely silent. The one person who saw every warning sign was the person nobody considered important enough to listen to. The stranger's final words settled over Crown Hall with a weight no financial report could measure. Nobody argued. Nobody rushed to defend themselves. Because deep down, everyone in the room understood the uncomfortable truth. The most valuable lesson of the night had not come from a billionaire, a security consultant, or a room full of powerful executives. It had come from a waitress. For several long seconds, silence ruled the ballroom. Then Ethan Sterling slowly turned toward Maya Brooks. The crowd followed his gaze. Hours earlier, most of them could not have picked her out of a lineup. She had been part of the background. A quiet employee carrying trays between tables. Now she stood at the center of a story none of them would forget. Maya shifted uncomfortably beneath the attention. Recognition was unfamiliar territory. She had spent years learning how to work hard without being noticed. Yet tonight there was no place to hide. The stranger folded his document and placed it back inside his jacket. Security officers remained nearby, but their posture had changed. The tension that had dominated the evening was beginning to dissolve. Questions still remained. Reports would be written. Procedures would be reviewed. Systems would be rebuilt. But the mystery itself had been solved. Ethan looked around the ballroom. Investors, politicians, advisors, journalists, people who measured value in market shares and quarterly earnings. Then he looked back at Maya. When did you first know something was wrong? He asked. Maya thought about the question. The metallic click. The unfamiliar face. The briefcase. The strange behavior. The details everyone else overlooked. I did not know, she answered honestly. I just paid attention. Ethan nodded slowly. The simplicity of the answer seemed to affect him more than any complicated explanation could have. Pay attention. Such ordinary words. Yet they carried a lesson worth more than the merger waiting on the stage. One of the journalists stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, she called. Will the signing ceremony continue? Ethan glanced toward the massive screens displaying the merger presentation. Earlier that evening, the deal had seemed like the most important event of the year. Now it felt strangely small. He smiled faintly. The deal can wait. The answer surprised the room. Then Ethan did something even more unexpected. He walked toward the stage and picked up one of the microphones prepared for the ceremony. The speakers carried his voice throughout Crown Hall. I have spent most of my career believing that success comes from hiring the smartest people in the room. He paused. Tonight I learned that wisdom sometimes comes from the person nobody thinks to ask. Every eye shifted toward Maya once again. She immediately looked down, embarrassed by the attention. Ethan continued. Our systems failed. Our procedures failed. Our assumptions failed. The room remained silent. But one person refused to ignore what everyone else missed. He turned toward Maya. And because of that, we are all standing here having this conversation instead of asking why the warning signs were ignored. Something changed across the ballroom. People began to clap. Slowly at first. Then louder. Investors. Hotel staff. Security officers. Journalists. The applause spread until it filled the room from wall to wall. Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes, but she smiled through them. Not because she wanted recognition. Because for the first time, people were listening. Weeks later, headlines across the country would focus on the security audit, the merger, and the lessons learned from the event. Yet the story people shared most often was different. It was about a waitress who noticed what nobody else noticed. A woman who trusted her instincts when every reason told her to stay silent. A woman who reminded an entire ballroom that attention, courage, and integrity do not belong exclusively to the powerful. Sometimes they belong to the person carrying the tray. Ethan Sterling eventually completed the merger. The companies prospered. The security flaws were corrected. But long after the contracts were signed and the headlines faded, one lesson remained. Power can command a room. Money can influence a room. Status can impress a room. But on that night in Chicago, the person who changed the room was a waitress who refused to look away.